I believe we are live. Good evening, Jacques.
Good evening, David.
So, for those of you tuning in, we are at Rumble, live streaming right now. We are at Facebook, and if you comment at Facebook, we can interact. We are at X, and if you comment on the video at X, we can interact. And we are at YouTube. And if you comment on the video at YouTube, then we can interact. Okay, the Rumble interaction is limited, but the other three platforms, we invite you to join, talk, give comments, ask questions, converse amongst each other as you're watching. I can bring your chat messages up on screen, of course, and that's really enjoyable. So, Jacques, we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, Canadian politics. It's provides with a constant array of things to discuss.
Mm-hmm. It's a circus. So I got my fresh coffee, and let's start with, let's say, a congratulations to all of the candidates that ran in Saskatchewan's election, and the polling was showing that the NDP actually had a chance of forming government in Saskatchewan, and now we know, of course, that the polls were terribly wrong. Scott Moe's government won by quite a landslide. Did you pay attention to that? Did you watch those results coming in?
I did not, and it's I'm ashamed to say that I wasn't even aware. Like, for some reason, I was aware of the BC and New Brunswick election, but
Yeah.
Saskatchewan, for some reason,
well, Saskatchewan is very forgettable, maybe. Like,
well,
I grew up there, so
quite,
I'm always paying attention.
no, I quite like the province, but yeah, for some reason I missed it. But based on what you're telling me, they certainly ended up with the lesser of two evil.
I agree.
By quite a bit. So
yeah, I agree. In fact, there's a bit of an echo at your side. I'm sorry. The Saskatchewan United Party, which is a right of center, sort of they're right of center, they did quite well also. I think 4% of the popular vote, and that may send a message to Scott Moe's party that that they might take. They might realize that there's support in the province for more conservative policy making. Like, for example, maybe it's time Scott Moe consider getting rid of the PST. He's been in, there's been a conservative government running that province for nearly 20 years. Why do they still have a provincial sales tax? It's mind-boggling to me. But yes, then we now have the results of the BC election. The NDP in BC just squeaked by with, I think, one seat, maybe two. I forget. Their final results were 47 seats. And so that's a minority government. Anything to say about that?
Well, it's a bit shocking to me, given the state of affairs in the province. I mean, the NDP is woke on steroid in that province, and you would have thought that people would have learned a lesson. I continue to be baffled by these results.
I'm baffled also that Saskatchewan was able to go to the polls, count the ballots, and announce the winner the night of. And BC, electronic voting, lots of mail-in ballots, and they don't know who won the election until like a week has passed, and we discovered that there were elections officials that were allowed to take ballot boxes to their homes to store them temporarily. We found out that late, like after the election day, there were 46,000, or I forget the final number, 64,000 mail-in ballots that were discovered. Like, it's a disaster if we can't have an election, count the ballots, and know the results. I'll make it known that I'm personally, I've been writing software all of my adult life. I've been running software teams most of my adult life. I've worked with software organizations, and I regularly consult with software organizations, managers of companies that make incredible software. There is no way I would want to use software to count ballots and manage an election. It should be paper ballots, show up at the poll, human counters in an open space with lots of people. scrutineers, human scrutineers that can observe the ballot counting. I really think that's the best way to maintain integrity in the electoral system. Sorry, that's me ranting.
It's quite all right.
The New Brunswick election was also recent. Congratulations to all those, and we talked about that also in our last episode. So maybe anything more to say there?
No. Oh, and of course, Nova Scotia now. I think the premier is just like this is Nova Scotia has a fixed election date, which apparently can be ignored, which which makes you wonder what's the purpose of having a fixed election date if it's not fixed. I mean, the whole thing to me is just so.
Can the premier extend or postpone the election, or I think what he's done is he's called a snap election, which is he can move the election forward in time.
Yeah, but I mean, but we see, if you look at it that way, we've always had fixed election, right? 4-year term, and you can't go beyond that. The whole purpose of fixed election was to remove the advantage that the incumbent party had by being able to call an election at the time that suited them best. I mean, there's all kinds of indication that in Ontario, where I am, we're going to go to the polls in the spring, even though we don't have to. But it would allow the Conservative, because they're polling well right now, to extend majority for another 4 years.
Yeah, it's a bit of a cheat code.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it. We've got some topics to address. I'm going to bring up a video here because, and then do you want to introduce this one or just comment after the fact? This is apparently Justin Trudeau's party is fully united behind him.
Well, okay, it's good for a laugh. Play it.
All right, here we go.
Well, I don't think we discussed what happens in caucus, but it was a robust conversation.
The Prime Minister's the leader. Minister Farad, please clarify where they stand now with the Liberals. Are you united behind the Prime Minister?
We're united in defeating Poilievre next campaign.
Okay, here he comes, by the way. So this is the Liberal Party leaving the caucus meeting a few days ago. And I just find it interesting, Justin Trudeau's little swagger here. I think it's funny.
Sir, please get an understanding of what happened in caucus.
But one thing that we were united on, everybody.
Mr. Garrison, is caucus united behind the Prime Minister?
Trudeau.
Is the caucus united behind you?
The party is strong and united.
Well, first of all, what would anyone expect? I mean, that he would come out and say, boy, they really hate me and we're totally, not united. I mean, it's all posturing.
Yeah, he's acting. His little swagger, the walk,
all
of it is rehearsed.
Absolutely. It's all staged, trying to make him look like he has no care in the world, that everything is fine. Mm-hmm. And I don't know who the woman was, but, are you united behind the Prime Minister? Didn't address that. No, we are united in winning the next election. Yeah,
I forget her name. The first lady, the first woman in the clip was Karina Gold. She's the current Speaker of the House, maybe. And of course she's going to say that we're united. The fact of the matter is, objectively, all of them are lying. They know that we all know that the party is in shambles. The party is there's factions that want to tear down Trudeau's office. There's factions that want him out. The poll numbers are obviously showing that the party is not united. He's had people resign and leave like they're not running in the next election. They're quietly announcing that they're not running in the next election. Like anyone that can watch this clip and conclude that they're telling the truth is crazy. Sorry, that's just me.
You know, David is one of those, you know, where they say they're lying to you, and they know that you know that they're lying, but we know that you know that they're lying, and you know, and so forth. And it goes on.
And they're still lying. Yeah.
Yeah.
That quote is sometimes attributed to Solzhenitsyn, and I don't know for sure. Like I recently read the book. It was an audio book, the Gulag Archipelago, and I don't recall hearing that exact quote, but it's often attributed to him. I agree. Yeah, they're okay. So you want to move on? This is
Get him off the screen here. I can't stand his mug.
Okay, then the next clip is about the Bloc Québécois, and they're puffing their chest, of course.
Justin Trudeau will have more negotiating to do next week. The Bloc Québécois set a deadline for Liberal cooperation, saying if they don't get it, they will look to bring down the minority government. CTV's Rachel Aiello joins us now. Rachel, the leader jumped from one challenge to the next.
Marilla, after brushing off a deadline from his MPs, another ultimatum tied to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's ability to stay in power is set to expire next week.
From the outset of the fall sitting, Justin Trudeau has relied on votes from the Bloc Québécois and the NDP to keep his minority Liberal government alive. But next Tuesday, the clock will run out on the 5 weeks Yves-François Blanchet gave the Liberals to heed his demands. The Bloc wanted help passing bills to boost seniors' benefits and protect supply management, or they'd start talking to the other opposition parties about triggering a snap election.
So we're not inflexible. We've been open enough.
With no signs the Liberals are ready to make a deal, they're likely to lose the Bloc's backing, leaving the NDP to be their only potential parliamentary dance partner. A potential brief reprieve? NDP leader Jagmeet Singh revealed this week that he won't be using the only NDP Opposition Day motion of the fall to try to bring the government down.
Different from the Conservatives, our focus is to get things done for people.
That said, it remains to be seen when the next Opposition Day will be, or when another non-confidence motion could be moved, as the House of Commons remains at a standstill, with the Conservatives and Liberals still fighting over releasing unredacted Green Tech Fund documents. Marilla?
Rachel is in Ottawa.
Okay, David, before we talk about the usual posturing and my views in terms of what's going to happen, I want to address the two demands of the Bloc because they are both terrible policies and people need to understand this. So first of all, they were asking or demanding an immediate 10% increase in OAS, old age security payments, to all Canadians between the ages of 65 and 75. And the reason they're targeting that group is that the Liberal government had already increased benefits for the 75 and above group. Okay. Now, I've written about this, I've talked about this, but OAS carries an unfunded liability of about $500 billion. To put it in simpler terms, we ought to have today $500 billion set aside to make these payments because the future taxes will not be sufficient to pay for the promises made. Okay? 500 billion. So this demand is on top of something that we cannot pay already. It is completely irresponsible, but it's par for the course, right? I mean, that would make them popular today, and some poor guy down the road is going to be stuck having to deal with the issue. So that's the first one. And by the way, I have not verified the numbers, but they say it's going to add $19 billion. And keep in mind, we are running a deficit already over the next 5 years. Now, that's a start, but the proper accounting should have been, how much is that going to add over the foreseeable future? Because, I mean, in a way, short of a government in the future reducing payments, right, future governments are kind of stuck having to pay for this extra amount that we can't pay for right now. So that's number one, totally irresponsible. Number two, they demanded, and the Senate is debating this law. This is something that would, by law, prevent any negotiator, Canadian negotiator in the future, to even talk about supply management in trade negotiation with other countries. Now, supply management on its own is a terrible policy. Canadians are paying more than they ought to. It's a special arrangement that there are all kinds of elements in the farming community where they don't have supply management. They do just fine. This idea that for some reason dairy farmers need to be coddled or protected is, again, nonsense. I mean, farming, just like any other profession or trade, you will find some excellent farmers. There are some terrible farmers. The terrible farmers are essentially well, not so much allowed, but they're enabled in a way to continue. In a free market, they would disappear as they ought to. So again, terrible, but I think that something like more than 50% of dairy farmers are based in Quebec, so he's speaking to his book here. But it's on its own, it's a terrible policy. Now, so having addressed those two things,
well, can I just ask questions about those?
Yep.
So let's deal with the second point first, which is about supply management. So are you saying that the Bloc wants to prevent future Canadian politicians from negotiating supply deals, for example, in the free trade agreement with the U.S.? That any discussion about controlling the prices of dairy or the production of wheat in the country would be off the table in negotiations?
No, not wheat. Here we're talking specifically about dairy supply management.
Just dairy, so not all supply managed, because there are other commodities that are managed, but that the supply is managed in our country. The Saskatchewan Wheat Board, for example.
Yeah, but the Wheat Board is not. It's not supply management. People don't have to buy quotas.
Okay.
Like supply management is where a farmer cannot exceed the amount of quota that he's purchased.
So this is only true in dairy?
No, it's also good for chickens.
Okay.
And eggs.
Okay. Why would he want this? What benefit does this provide the country or even Quebec?
Well, so there's two answers to this. The first one, the most immediate one, is that anytime you talk to a dairy farmer about undoing supply management, well, let me step back a minute. The vast majority of dairy farmers are adamantly opposed to changing supply management.
Because it's a protectionist policy currently for their industry?
I'm sorry?
Because it's a protectionist policy for the current industry?
Very much so.
Okay.
Now, some of them are in disagreement. They would love to compete in the free market, but the majority want to defend it. And they will defend it to the point where they will get active on the political scene against anybody who, well, let me give you an example of what happened with the Conservative Party. Max Bernier was on the verge of winning the leadership of the Conservative Party when I think it was Andrew Scheer signed up a whole bunch of separatist Quebec-based farmers as member of the parties, and he got enough of those to actually win the nomination, right? So they will go to great lengths to protect supply management. That's what they want. So that's what I mean when he's talking to his book. He's basically talking to those Quebec-based farmers and say, hey, this is what I got it. But now this is where it gets kind of funny. As I said, I believe that slightly more than 50% of dairy farmers are based in Quebec. Most of them are separatists. Yeah. Blanchette is a separatist. Now, what do you think is going to happen if they do separate? do you think that these dairy farmers in Quebec who produce far more than the province requires, I mean, they export a great deal to the rest of the country, do you think that they will continue to benefit that way? I would think not. Right? So I don't know. I don't understand the inconsistency in thinking here, but
yeah,
par for the
I'm
course.
reminded just on the general topic of supply management or the government intervening in the market like this. And this is maybe a topic for our Libertarian Lens series, but I recently read the Eleanor Ostrom, I think is her name. She wrote a book called Governing the Commons, where I wouldn't say that she's a libertarian, but she's critical of the idea. Like, are you familiar with the concept of the tragedy of the commons?
Very much so.
So Eleanor Ostrom's book, she really takes that concept to task and shows examples where the commons has been better managed or by private market or free market, or sometimes by community groups, or sometimes by government. And so they're really good examples, but I think it's a great book. But I'm not convinced that Canada's government needs to be involved in supply management. Having said that, the first topic now about the unfunded liabilities, the 10% increase in OAS. So, Jacques, would it be incorrect to say that Blanchette is making a calculation here that he can demand a 10% increase in this benefit, knowing that over the next 4 to 5, 6, 7 years, there will be 2% inflation, such that it actually kind of wipes out that 10%. That we can pay these people more, but 10 years, 6 years from now, the government will have more revenues, higher. It'll appear like they have higher revenues because of inflation.
Well, I wouldn't think so, because OAS is already indexed.
And it's already an unfunded liability.
Oh, yeah.
But would it be fair to say that one of the strategies that our government has already or may employ in the future is to inflate the currency such that the unfunded liabilities just dissipate? Dissipate might be the wrong word, but I don't know if I'm asking the right question.
Well, I think I know where you're going, but I think what's far more likely is that governments will try, I mean, to your point about inflation, they will try to inflate their way out of debt.
Yeah.
But with OAS, they do have a problem in the sense that OAS is already regularly increased to CPI.
Got it. So it's already indexed to the inflation.
Yeah. Now, I mean, that would be a topic for a different day if we could get maybe an economist on, but there are many, many people who believe and live every day convinced that the CPI is misleading. And it's misleading on the low side, right? That they think that the price increases are far higher than what the CPI says they are.
Yeah, there's a guy at YouTube that I quite like. His channel is called Market Mania, and he frequently talks about how the Stats Canada numbers and the Bank of Canada numbers are and resulting in this sort of fiction about the CPI. It's really interesting. I don't know if we're still on the topic of Trudeau's Liberal Party being in chaos, but the next clip that I have is
David, what I was going to say, for what it's worth, is I don't think, for all the posturing that the Bloc is doing and some Liberal MPs unhappy or whatever, we are not going to have an election until next year, simply because I don't see for a minute, like the Liberals, the only thing, they don't need the Bloc. All they need is the NDP. And
they've got them, the NDP.
And they've got it. I mean, Jagmeet Singh the other day said that the NDP was not looking for an election. Now, we're not afraid of one, he said, but we're not looking for one, which is code name for, no, we don't want one.
Let's see a clip of Jagmeet Singh. I think I've got one queued up where he's saying precisely that. Here we go.
Of you voting non-confident. The Bloc deadline has passed, and the Liberals need NDP support to keep going if they don't want to go to an election. Do you want anything in exchange for your support for the Liberals?
We made it really clear what we're focused on. We're seeing people right now that are telling us it is impossible to afford groceries and all their bills. They can't find housing that's
The non-answer.
And they're worried about our healthcare system becoming more and more privatized, where you got to spend money on your credit card to get care. That's wrong. So we're focused on making sure we solve these problems. So we'll look at any bill that comes forward, any motion that comes forward, and if it's going to help people with these difficult times, we'll look at that.
You've said that you won't let conservatives and the Bloc decide when we go to an election. Does that mean that you will not support any of the non-confidence motions by the conservatives this fall? As I answered, my priority is to help people. We are in difficult times. Will you support a conservative?
So we got about 40 seconds left of this clip, but notice there was a question shouted there, will you support a conservative non-confidence motion? Jacques, Brian Lilly reported today something interesting so Chrystia Freeland apparently is bringing forward a Ways and Means motion. The crux of the motion is to fund or not fund pregnancy crisis centers for pregnancy care that do not support abortion. So what they're doing is they're saying they're bringing the issue of abortion into a funding issue, into a Ways and Means motion. So a Ways and Means motion can be a non-confidence vote. So do you see the game that Trudeau's playing here? Like, you vote non-confidence, that means you're against abortion. You vote confidence, that means you're for abortion and you trust our government.
No, they are desperate, and it's a sign that they have nothing else to afford but then to get on with these wedge issues. That's all they know. That's the only thing they're left with.
Yeah. Let's carry on the clip.
We're in such hard times right now, and I've talked to so many people, and they've told me I can't find housing that is affordable. I can't buy groceries because it's too expensive, and that's my priority. So no, we will not allow the Conservatives and the Bloc to cut the services that people need. People that we forced the government to do, things that help people in these difficult times. For seniors who are now getting dental care. That's something that can change their lives. So no, we won't let Pierre Poilievre cut these programs that help Quebecers disproportionately.
The guy's a joke. It's all posturing. I guarantee you, like, he has no intention, doesn't matter how bad the bill is, he will find some justification for supporting it. He's got a pension along with other members of his party to protect. He's not, and I'm also told that their fundraising have been terrible. They are simply not equipped to go into it. So this is all posturing. It's the same type of posturing that we've had from him over the last 3 years, where in the House of Commons, he's badgering the Liberals all the time. And as soon as he's in front of the camera, he's telling us how terrible they are. I mean, he should make up his mind. You can't, support them and at the same time argue that they're the worst government we've ever had.
Well, he's made up his mind, but he's just a good enough actor to continue to persuade and hoodwink NDP voters. It's unbelievable to me that, I grew up in an NDP family. I grew up in Saskatchewan, as I've said before on this program, and my grandfather is probably turning in his grave either at the fact that I'm not an NDP supporter, or he might look at the current NDP party right now and just be astonished at how they've changed.
Probably both.
Probably both. May he rest in peace. He was a great man.
Yes.
The next topics then. Okay, so I need to, I'm going to bring up this video about Marit Stiles. You wanted to talk about this, so I'll just be ready to play it when you say so, but how about you introduce it?
Well, it is astonishing again to me why, if you consider the state of healthcare and education in Ontario, where I live, those are the two largest expenditures of the government. I can tell you both of them are a mess. Kids on the education front, 60%, 50% of kids cannot meet the province's own minimum threshold in math and language. These numbers are unacceptable, right? So the government, because these are public schools, is doing a terrible, terrible job. Healthcare, well, who doesn't know the ongoing horror stories? Waiting 12 hours in an emergency room, waiting 2-3 years to get surgeries that is required. I forget the latest number, but the numbers who don't have a GP. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But, elect an NDP government next election, and boy, they're going to create another government arm called Homes Ontario, and we're going to have houses, prices are going to come down, it's going to be wonderful. Why people believe this nonsense, again, makes your head shake. So play it, but this is like shooting fish in a barrel.
So it's 3.5 minutes. I don't know if I can stand it that long, but let's try. Here we go.
Well,
Hi.
I don't know if you can advance it. I think the first, I don't know, minute and a half or two or whatever is just to talk about how terrible the province is right now.
Okay, here's where she's starting to say, with Houses Ontario. Here, I'm just reading the clip. Talking. Okay, here we go. They're going to take care of the basics, right? Oh, the government needs to take care of you. We're going to provide all the basics. Here we go.
And your government takes care of the basics. Building homes, hiring doctors, fixing schools, and making life affordable for you. Let's talk about housing, because housing is at the heart of everything we're working to change.
David, thank you. I mean, the very premise, she doesn't know this, I suspect, but I would be willing to bet that if you could bring back her grandparents or great-grandparents to life and take a look today, they would be appalled by this message. I mean, I'm absolutely convinced that our ancestors of 2 or 3 generations ago, who were independently minded, like this idea that the government is going to take care of my basics, I mean, it would be completely foreign to them, right? So this.
I don't know, Jacques. Not long ago, there was a huge support worldwide for socialism and communism in all its various forms.
But not in the West. Not here.
We had the CCF. We still have a communist party, although it has minimal support. We have a socialist government in power right now.
Okay, I mean, but these are kind of fringe things, right? I mean, I would argue that this country, whether it was the Liberals or the Conservative, right, until, things, I admit, things have changed over the last 20, 30 years. But the Liberal Party or the Conservative Party of 100 years ago, they wouldn't have touched this. They didn't believe in any of this.
Well, you might be right. I'd like to know more about that past, but let's hear. Do you want to hear more from her?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, here we go.
I'm Premier. We'll launch Homes Ontario, the largest home building program in Ontario's history. With Homes Ontario, we'll get the government back in the business of building homes and make housing construction easier, faster.
When was the last time that the government was in the business of building homes? Was it following World War II? I hear stories about there was some arm of government that built a bunch of wartime homes. Was that a real thing?
Yeah, it was a real thing, and I suspect you're right.
So weird. Okay.
Faster and more affordable. Here's how we're going to do it. We'll start by legalizing fourplexes and four-story multiplexes in every neighborhood. And we're going to increase density around
David?
transit.
Yeah.
So notice here, right? We are going to legalize fourplexes.
Yeah.
Well, what is the implication? The implication is that
Hold
currently
on, it's already legal.
Well, no,
Isn't
she said if we're going to legalize it, it means that right now it's not legal.
Well, but I think it is in certain jurisdictions. I think isn't there a debate right now in Ontario, and Doug Ford's getting in a bunch of trouble because he's saying, well, fourplexes shouldn't be allowed in certain areas. I think it's a zoning issue, but there are some zones where these structures are allowed.
Okay, but she's clearly talking about areas where they're not allowed.
Right.
Okay.
So she's saying we're going to override the municipalities, we're going to override other levels of government and force them to change their zoning laws.
Right, but what I'm trying to get at here is that she is saying that, boy, the government's going to solve a government problem. Right? I mean, that's what people don't seem to get. I mean, the problem exists because government have enacted measures that are I mean, most people, you talk to developers, they will tell you the number one reason why we don't get as many houses as we ought to is because of bureaucracy, bylaws, regulations, and the work. Well, where did those come from? They're all government enacted, right? So now she's saying, oh my goodness, like, government's going to fix the problem. Well, government created the problem in the first place. It's like Harry Brown, who ran for the presidency of the U.S. He said, the government is the one who breaks your leg and then shows up with crutches and passes itself off as some kind of savior. Anyway, keep on playing, but right off the bat, I mean, this is
crazy talk.
Creating stronger, more affordable, better connected communities. But we won't stop there. Homes Ontario will double the supply of permanently affordable housing by providing funding, low-cost financing, and public land for nonprofit and co-op housing providers.
So co-op housing providers. So anyway. I want to point out here that she's using the phrase affordable housing, and people, please understand that is different than housing affordability. Okay, so when a socialist says affordable housing, they mean take taxes from you, then they spend money to buy houses, to build houses, and then they can subsidize the arrangement, the rent, the etc., the housing arrangements of many families who they deem need it. That it's different than having housing affordability, which means your family can afford houses. Sorry to interrupt, but could we carry on?
Yeah.
We'll build homes for people, not profits. And crucially, we'll protect renters by bringing back real rent control.
Who's profiting from the construction of homes? I believe there's profit to be made, but Jacques, is it like, what's the problem here that someone might risk to create a house with their personal investment and then sell it to someone who needs that house? And if in the meantime they make a small margin on that, I have no problem with that. Is she talking instead about, like, I'd love to have a conversation about whether multinational real estate investment trusts should be able to buy in our market, or that foreign non-citizens should be able to buy in our market. Can we have that conversation? Or is that too protectionist of me? I mean, I don't think that's what she's talking about.
Well, let me address her comment about, we're going to build for people, not for profit. I grow tired of having to fight that this is like whack-a-mole, people coming up over and over again with bad economics or not understanding what the heck they're talking about. Like, that statement on its own is completely illogical. I mean, what does that mean? I'm going to build for profit. I mean, I don't even know what that means, but I'll tell you this. If you're a developer and you want to make a profit, you're going to try to make this affordable. I mean, who's going to come in and say, oh, my profit margin on this house is 300%, and then I don't sell any? I mean, you don't make profit if you don't sell. right? The profit incentive is the one that actually gets things done. But I mean, if you belong to the NDP, you don't understand this, you don't want to believe it, and you trot out the same economic garbage over and over again, like slogans that people go for. You're going
I'd like to meet a member of provincial parliament in Ontario, an NDP member of provincial parliament that runs their own business. Like, I think that's probably as rare as, well, I don't know what's rare. I don't know the right simile, but like, if they run their own business, they're not NDP, they're probably running for conservative parties. Let's hear the rest of her little
With Homes Ontario,
speech.
housing won't be a luxury. It will be a right. The private market alone won't fix the housing crisis. With Homes Ontario, we will. Ontario, this fall economic statement is about the choices we're making to build the future we all deserve. New Democrats will make the right choices. I know we're all concerned about our family's future, wondering if our kids will have the same opportunities to thrive that we did.
Why did previous generations have an opportunity to thrive? Like, wasn't it that they could afford a home on the wages of a plumber? My biological father, who died many years ago, he was a plumber. He ran his own little company, and in 1973 he earned something around $30,000, and the house that he built cost $32,000-33,000. I can't imagine
that would be a topic for another current. But I mean, central banks, debasement of fiat currency are at the root cause, because what you described is absolutely correct. In the 1950s, 60s, 70s, you could have a blue-collar guy with a wife who was staying at home raising their kids, and often 4 or 5 kids, and doing just fine, thank you very much.
Yeah.
But again,
with a cottage and maybe a RV, like they lived with abundance on what we would now call poverty level salary.
Well, I mean, like I think that's
a plumber today. I mean, unless they're running some magical business model, they're working for contracts, they're working long hours, and they're bringing home a reasonable amount, but it's not able to afford the kinds of amenities that they could back then on a similar with a similar job.
Okay, I would go back to her and say, boy, like, your party was once in power in this province. You made a mess of education. You made a mess of healthcare, and now you're telling us that you got the magic solution. I mean, this is laughable. This is completely laughable, and I don't think I want to hear the rest of it, because it's just nonsense.
Good. I'm glad you said that. Now we can move on. We'll move on to another, because I don't know that I can handle more of her. I'm complaining, like I'm getting emotional about it. But also notice that her whole approach here is the emotional appeal.
Oh, of course.
And that's their trick. There's no logic to it. It's all emotion. And what I'm going to do next is bring
David,
up
we were talking about healthcare. We have a comment here. It says Surrey, BC is the fastest growing area of BC, and the one hospital there is already estimated at 12-hour emergency wait times. And they've recently stated they expect that to get to 24 hours. My goodness. Yeah. But boy, having really screwed up the healthcare, boy, let's turn housing over to the government, because guaranteed success.
If we could just allow the market to respond, there would be someone noticing, hey, Surrey, BC is the fastest growing area. I'm going to invest and create a hospital there.
Yeah.
But the market can't respond because it's controlled centrally. And I find that interesting. How about we move over to the food professor.
Yeah.
Sorry. The food professor talking here about the food banks. There's just a couple of tweets on screen, and I know you wanted to comment on these. Please go ahead.
Right. So a report came out, dismal numbers. Canadians have gone through a very bad threshold. There are now more than 2 million of them using food banks. I believe there was a massive increase of 35% in 2022 or 2023, 14% increase this year. So this is, rocketing along, and it is not, contrary to what the Liberals would have us believe, it's not a sign of a good economy when 5% of your population has to rely on food banks. So this is just yet another indicator of how bad things are in this country. There's not much more to add, but I just wanted to let people know of this report that came out. 2 million people.
Yeah. So for those of you that might be listening while driving or something, I'll just read the two tweets. So the food professor says, breaking news, Canada's reliance on food banks has reached a grim milestone, surpassing 2 million visits per month for the first time, according to data from Food Banks Canada. And then he comments further to say, we're hearing from our food, this is a quote from CTV News that the food professor has shared. The quote says, we're hearing from our food bank network that donations are down. Many people who used to donate to food banks are now seeking help from them instead.
Right.
Shameful. Absolutely shameful.
Things are bad. They're very bad.
Food professor also released and has been very active on this issue. I know you've been following it. I've not been following it as closely. Go ahead, Jacques. Tell us about it.
Right. So he was discussing a report that came out last week. One of the things was that since 2012, I believe, dairy farmers in this country have been dumping 1 billion liters of milk down the drain on average. The numbers go up and down, of course, but on average, 1 billion. Total market value of, I forget the exact number, but in the billions of dollars. So we were talking about the Bloc earlier, protecting supply management. One of the byproduct of supply management is that you have, let me explain exactly the way this works. So a farmer buys quota, which allows him to produce up to a certain level, but it is cheaper for them to exceed that level and dump the excess than to underproduce their quota, right? So they tend to really ramp up production, and then if they exceed their quota, boom, they get dumped. Last year, there was a very touching video. I believe the farmer was in Manitoba, and he did a video of him dumping all this milk, and he was on the verge of tears because he said he had offered the milk to food banks, to schools in terms of these lunch programs, and of course all of that would have been illegal. And he was talking about what a travesty, what a waste of resource. So this is one of the many things that are wrong with the supply management, but that's one of the byproducts. Oh, I want to add this. I know it wasn't covered in this particular segment, but the report that came out about the food banks indicated that it was immoral to pay taxes on certain food items, and that ought to be stopped immediately. Immoral. So I'm glad to see that some people are starting to come around to the libertarian viewpoint. The only problem is, of course, now they pick and choose in terms of where they think morality ends or morality stops. But I don't know. Maybe we're making some headways.
Yeah, if one kind of tax is deemed immoral, what of the other taxes?
Well, I mean, it's so easy to start saying, okay, you think that food, because it's a necessity of life, presumably, should not be taxed. Okay, How about
Clothes.
heating? Well, yeah, I need clothes, right? I need to heat my home in the winter, and we all know that gets taxed. I mean, my goodness, if you use
I need income.
oil or
Why are you
natural
taxing
gas,
my income?
right?
That's a necessity of my life. I need income. Interesting. So they're picking and choosing where their morality applies to taxing or not. What of this comment here? Here's a farmer who offers an argument. He says, what percent of the discarded milk is good milk? He says, I bet 99% of the volume discarded is non-consumable. Bacterias, antibiotics, equipment problems, etc. He asserts no dairy farmer dumps milk that they could sell.
Yeah, well, the key here is that they could sell, because you cannot sell more than the quota allows you to.
Well, and in the video that you talked about, that farmer, I remember seeing that farmer. I don't know if it was Manitoba or Western Ontario, but he was, yeah, he said, like I could, this is 30,000 liters that I'm dumping right now. I could give it to a food bank.
Yeah, yeah. No, this guy is playing games, I think, because
He benefits from the protectionist policy currently.
Yeah,
probably.
Well,
let's move on to a new topic here. So we've heard from, okay, Bill C-65. Now, this was recently tabled, I understand. So I have not read the bill. It's a huge bill. There's something like 76 pages. I noticed this thread earlier today, and I thought I'd like Jacques' perspective about this. So, Jacques, I've brought this up on screen. Bill C-65 is called Changes to Canada's Elections, an act to amend the Canada Elections Act. The first reading was March 20th, so I'm sorry, I'm behind. I've not heard of this. I heard about it, but so there are some key points that we could talk about, perhaps. The bill is...
David,
yeah, go ahead.
Before you go on, I just want to... Last June, I was in Ottawa, along with representatives of all other federally registered party. This is an annual event hosted by Elections Canada, where they let us know about certain developments and what have you. Bill C-65 was discussed. Now, you're correct to say that it's very lengthy. There's a lot in it. I just want to say that they mentioned a couple of things, one of which was that parliamentarians, as you know, are trying to move the fixed date of the election next year by a week. Presumably, or the excuse they're giving is that the date in question would coincide with some form of religious day in some faith. I forget what it was, but the chief electoral officer pointed out that they, like at Elections Canada, were going to push back against that element, because the date that was proposed apparently is the same as municipal election date in Quebec, and he was pointing out that the same venues would be used, and therefore you would run into a problem. So it's interesting that in some cases, and this is a point they've made over and over again, that quite often the people at Elections Canada are simply stuck having to administer the rules, right? They don't make them, or the laws, I should say. They don't make them, because if they get passed, well, their job is to... But he said, in this case, we are pushing back on this one because we don't think it makes any sense. So just to give a bit of background, we can go to some of the specifics now.
Yeah, thanks. That's good background. The thread points out a few interesting facts about this bill. One of the facts is that the sponsor of the bill is this Dominic LeBlanc, who, remember, Dominic LeBlanc appointed his own family member to be an ethics commissioner when, of course, the Liberal Party is plagued with scandal and ethical violations. And so, by the way, I don't even know if I'm following this person. Is it Nia Fannerstill? I'm going to guess at how to pronounce her name, and I'm going to guess it's a her. But she says the election bill is 76 pages. This is the bill where they want to start using electronic voting machines on a federal level, just like the BC just like BC has done provincially. I think Ontario does it provincially as well. But more importantly here, the chief electoral officer would be able to make modifications to elections rules without quantifying what that means.
If I may present you with, I think, one example, although the example I'm going to give you would seem to imply that they are capable of making modifications already. But you may recall, there's a movement right now, I forget the name of it, but it's the one that tries to put like a gazillion candidates on the ballot, right? I think it's to protest the first past the post. And like a record was broken recently, I believe, in one of the ridings in Winnipeg, where there were in excess of 100 people on the ballot. And the chief electoral officer was pointing out to us that when that happens, your standard form cannot accommodate, right? So they have to come up with modification very, very quickly, which I think he has the authority to. So I don't know if she's talking about additional modification, but I just want to know that again. I want you to know that again, that there is some discretion for unusual cases.
Okay, so there's already discretion. Why does this bill have to expand that, I wonder?
Yeah.
Who is the chief electoral officer? Okay, this person points out that the current electoral officer is a Liberal who used to work in the Privy Council office. This is also the bill that will change the elected.
David, I need to mention, maybe I'm being naive, but in that meeting I found all of the members of, all the employees of Elections Canada to be, to my eyes, scrupulously neutral. Again, maybe I'm naive, but so what she's saying there could be true. Maybe it is true, but I certainly got no sense at all from him that he's biased in any way. So just for fairness, I want to put that out.
Thank you. That's good to hear. Let's not jump to conclusions too quickly. Remember, though, this is the bill that will change the election date. Now, I found this interesting because I've been confused. I thought that was already decided, that the date has been moved a week, and apparently it hasn't yet. And this is interesting to me also because this is another, Justin Trudeau is sort of holding this carrot over the MPs in his own party, in the NDP party, and the Bloc to say, hey, you're going to follow me or I'm not going to table this bill.
Yeah, but this is the one where Elections Canada is pushing back. They don't think there's any justification to move it back by a week.
Well, we'll find out if Elections Canada has more power than the House of Commons. The bill
as they say, all we can do is make recommendations, right? They don't have the power to change laws.
Right. So the bill allows your statement might be, you're presuming that the Liberal Party is going to listen to reason. And I know that they don't believe that. The bill also allows a person to vote without proof of residency as long as a person of residency vouches for the person without residency. Can you believe this? I just saw a map of the United States where all of the states that don't allow voter ID. Like in California, it's now illegal to show voter ID when you show up at the poll. But there's a series of, I think there's 10 or 11, 12 of them that don't allow voter ID, which means I could show up at a poll and say that I'm Jacques Boudreau, and I can cast a vote in your name. Can you believe that? And now what we're doing in Canada, apparently, is they want to make it possible that someone who has residency in the country can just show up with someone at the poll and say, I vouch for this person. Yes, they are a resident of Canada, with no ID, no proof of residency. Then Nia, if I'm saying her name right, details a few things about foreign interference that I find really confusing. So the bill quantifies that foreign interference must include a receipt of money spent to influence voters, and she says, but I guess threatening to kill their family in Beijing seems perfectly acceptable. Wow. I won't go into much more detail here, but there are a few other items regarding foreign interference where then she concludes, like money can flow in from a third party. Third parties can now spend money to advertise on behalf of a political party. Money can flow in from other countries to individuals in Canada. I mean, I don't want to take these things out of context, but the conclusion she comes to is here. The bill does very little, if anything, to prevent or deter foreign interference. In fact, I argue it makes it easier. Also, the government wants to make future elections 3 days long. It's insane.
You know, the people at Elections Canada, they said, we have good reason to believe that foreign interference has taken place at the nomination level. But he said, we have seen no evidence of foreign interference on election day.
They've seen no evidence, so they're not looking?
Well, I found the distinction to be rather interesting. So you have evidence that when it comes to nomination, there's some stuff going on, but on elections day itself, these nefarious forces take a break. So I wasn't quite sure what to make of that.
It's a good point. Yeah, they just, it's election day. We're going to respect the integrity of their election just on this one day. Because we're nice criminals. Yeah. This is a good comment. I mean, certainly it gives time to cheat by extending the election. Saskatchewan just had an election. Millions of people a little more than 1 million people showed up at polls. Humans counted the paper ballots. Everybody knew the election results the night of the election. This is how we've run elections all my life in our country. Why would we change that to a system that allows for more ambiguity? Ambiguity even regarding like the custody of the ballot, the identity of the voter. Like, what are we doing here? What is the motivation behind this except to cheat, really? Like, I don't understand the motivation behind this. Does anybody really struggle to vote? Is that the idea? We need to make it easier to vote. Who struggles to vote? Who argues that it's too difficult? I have to walk all the way to the elementary school at the end of my block to vote. Like, okay, I respect that there's a small percentage of people who really appreciate that they can mail it in. Maybe there's some expats that live outside of the country. There's a debate to be had whether they should even be allowed to vote, but for now they can, so they have to mail it in. I mean, it's crazy to me.
But again, David, this goes to the constant coddling that politicians believe they have to do, right? I mean, every minor inconvenience now gets blown out of proportion, right? Oh my goodness, you have to wait 10 minutes to vote, or you have to get in your car to drive to your polling station. Oh my goodness, the world is ending. We have to stop that. But like I'll provide again. We discussed some of these things in June, and like they were saying, well, what we're trying to do here is that when you walk into a polling station, because you probably know that in the old days, because apparently we're moving away from that, but they would look up your last name, the letter, the first letter of your last name, and then you would be assigned to a particular table. And they're saying, well, that this for some reason didn't work, and now you should be able to go to any table. And I thought, well, this is kind of odd, because I mean, the process that we've had since the 1800s is that you show up and you got some poor guy behind the table with his ruler and his piece of paper, and they find your name and they draw a line across it. Well, that kind of works if the said line or the said paper is at a desk. But now I'm thinking, what happens if, I mean, how do they communicate between each other to say, hey, you got to scratch off Boudreaux's name there because he voted at my table, and make sure that he doesn't show up at your table again. I mean, the whole thing,
I agree. I think this is kind of the answer to these questions, like why would we want to change election rules in these ways? The answer to that, for me, really always comes back to digital ID. Well, if we have a digital ID, then we could verify that Jacques has voted at this polling station. And if we had digital ID, then we could verify that this person is a resident or a citizen. If we had digital ID, then it doesn't matter that they mail it in or vote it in or show up at if all of it comes back to digital ID, and just recently, or this morning, I think it was, we saw a news article from Bloc reporter that, so it turns out that the government has disclosed that work is underway on digital credentials for the general public. So people that are concerned that our government is going to enforce digital ID, they've been cast aside as conspiracy theorists, and it turns out that they're making a digital ID.
Yeah, well, on that note, as people said, it seems very strange that over the last 3 or 4 years, everything that was labeled a conspiracy theory has been proven to be right.
Yeah. Central bank digital currency. Oh, it turns out the Bank of Canada is working on it. Digital ID. Turns out they've been working on it.
Yep.
I'm really happy to see, and I hope that he would stand by this promise that Pierre Poilievre announced after Blacklock's reported this yesterday, October 29th. The Conservative Party announced that they would enact a law that would make it impossible, I don't know how they would do that, but make it impossible for the government to enforce a digital ID in the future.
Well, yeah, those are empty promises, because government has the right, or the power, I should say, to enact any laws, which means that they can undo. Like, I'll give you an example.
Well,
let's assume that a government wanted to give money to a company to come and establish itself in Canada somewhere. I mean, as strange as it is, a subsequent government could actually pass a law making the previous law illegal and demand the money back. I mean, it's fraught with problems, but I'm saying governments have the ultimate power to enact or undo any laws as they see fit.
And there are some laws, though, that we would say should be harder to change, like, for example, the Charter.
Yeah, but even that, I mean, the Charter, because of the notwithstanding clause, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, and Section 1, which is the government gives you these rights. That means they can take them away.
Yeah.
These are fundamental rights, but they're only granted they're granted by the democratic government.
Yep.
They're not inalienable rights as they are stated in the U.S. Constitution. So it would be interesting, for example, if a Bill of Rights, I have Canada's Bill of Rights behind me, if a Bill of Rights would state your right to privacy, some language around digital identity, that your identity is, I don't know how they would do that. Because people need to understand that a digital identity will result in your DNA is the public key. So a digital identity will work very much like a blockchain. So the block in the chain is protected by what we call parallel key. There's parallel key. So there's a private key that's held within the software, and then there's a public key that, Jacques, that you would have, and it can be known to others, but it only fits this private key. So these two things have to come together that would then unlock the data. The only way to make private key unique, the most unique thing about Jacques Boudreau is your DNA. So the most secure key to use in this blockchain would be a representation of your DNA. A digital key, this is the plan of digital ID globally and central bank digital currency, which would also require a digital ID to access your money. It's bizarre to me. So that's why there's also, if you go to the Canada.ca website and look at the Government of Canada's effort to support biometrics IDs, they're fingerprinting you, their retinal scans. Eventually, it's DNA. That's what they're after. It will evolve towards that. Nobody disagrees. Anybody that understands blockchain knows that that's where it's headed.
Right.
Yeah. Well, my earphones are telling me that my batteries are dying. Maybe it's time to wrap up. We covered a lot of topics. Thanks. Yeah, I really enjoy our conversation. Thanks to all the folks that have. How are they going to get everyone's DNA? Says JJ. They already have most. Let's not kid ourselves. The PCR tests, we already know about 10% of the PCR tests during the COVID period were collected for DNA analysis. And they'll just require it. It's not going to be difficult that they'll require a swab, maybe a hair. If you've ever worked with a government contract, then you've gone through security clearance already, and they have biometrics data related to. So every contractor that has ever worked for federal government is already on record with biometrics information. This is not a difficult task for the government to collect DNA from everyone.
All right. I think I'm getting depressed here.
Okay. Sorry, Ancestry.ca and 23andMe, these are companies where people have voluntarily given DNA so that they can see who they're, they can look at their genealogy. My wife and I did it long before I realized that the companies were actually sharing these data with U.S. and Canadian governments. U.S. governments for sure. I shouldn't say that they shared it with Canada's government. I don't know that for sure, but I do know it was shared with the U.S. government. Well, okay, let's stop there. Yeah, I'm going to get depressed. Good to chat with you. Thanks for everyone that tuned in and all the comments. Join the party, $10 a year to become a member of the Libertarian Party of Canada. Show your support. And we're looking for candidates across the country. Go to the website, libertarian.ca, and consider signing up as a candidate in your riding or a nearby riding. We've done streams in the past where we talk about how to become a candidate, so look for those at YouTube or X or Rumble or Facebook. I think that's it.